It was in his invite, but I will resend it to Jack as soon as I get Facebook going here.
Hey, James, we have Jack and we have Paul Benz.
True.
Okay. Both of them are just like, I don't have the link. I don't have the password. You don't need a password. Resend me the link. I lost it again. It didn't download me. It just
I got you. I'm sending it. Let's see. I got to log on to Google so I can send it to Jack. But anyway, okay. So it's the 21st legislative update of 2023. I want to welcome everybody on Facebook Live. Real quick, we'll go around the room and introduce yourself. I'll start. My name is James Shrimpster. I'm the West Side Vice President and the Legislative Chair. So, Marco, go ahead.
Marco Monteblanco, the President of the Washington State FOP. Glad to be here again, starting these things.
Holt.
Hey there. Sorry, I have some computer issues. Holt Woodhelm, Spokane, FOP Lodge President.
And Mr. Transu.
I'm Michael Transu, everybody. I'm the contract lobbyist for the Washington State Fraternal Order of Police.
Okay, that's everybody we got in the room. There's some other people logging on, and when they do, I'll just recognize them. So Michael, we didn't really have a set agenda since this was the first one, but I wanted to talk about the pre-file bills that deal with law enforcement and some of the things we'll be looking at as we move forward in the session. I also wanted to talk about the two bills that were filed in the last 24 hours, or excuse me, the last 48 hours dealing with pursuits, more particularly the two sponsors. So if you could take that on, the floor is yours, sir.
I can do that. Well, good morning, everybody. As the saying goes, welcome to the first week of the Washington State 2023 session. For those of you who don't know, this is a 105-day session. Unlike the other Washington, the legislature convened, all members were sworn in, and it was the first time in a couple of years where those sorts of tasks were done in person. In-person state of the state by the governor, in-person state of the judiciary by the Supreme Court. So, kind of a normal start to a legislative session that's in person. This year, wearing masks is encouraged in most offices, and a lot of offices, for those of you who are going to come to Olympia at some point in time, either for us or for your own agency, a lot of offices are limiting attendance to 3 people. So just be mindful of that. And there's some introductory protocols on getting into offices where folks are, particularly on the House side, being led back to offices. So it's not as free flowing as it used to be. So they're still allowing remote testimony. I think that's kind of here to stay, as we've talked about in the past. The remote testimony and signing in is really something that the legislature feels, and I would agree, that really opened up, the legislative process to folks who wouldn't otherwise have the time or effort to travel to Olympia. It's not one thing that's worked out pretty well, and I think it's here to stay. It gets a little bit clunky when you're in the hearing rooms, when you have about, half the people maybe online and half the people in person, and with the chairs toggling between being in person and having people testify in person, and then toggling to people having to testify via Zoom and online. So work through it, but kind of is what it is. As you all probably know, the Democrats fared fairly well in the elections this last November. Most of them are talking about the results, or sort of proving that voters agree more with their agenda, and particularly on some big issues. Speaker of the House, Lori Jenkins, talked about recently that that Washingtonians have some greater trust in Democrats. noting at the same time that, usually the party in presidential power tends to lose the seats in midterm elections, but that just wasn't the case this past year. So having said all of that, last session, in the Senate, the tally was, 28 Democrats plus one Democrat that caucused, Senator Tim Sheldon, who caucused with the Republicans, plus 20 Republicans. So at the end of the day, while it appears, the Republicans picked up one seat, which was the election of Senator Drew McCune in the 35th. Since Sheldon was consistently a Republican, that's really not a pickup per se. So having said that, up in the 42nd, which is up in the Whatcom County area, I remember Senator Sefcik was appointed to that seat, and Representative Sharon Shoemake defeated him in that election. So that produced a new majority on the Senate side of 29 Democrats and 20 Republicans. So on the House side, technically the Democrats picked up one, but, the McCune Sheldon race kind of equaled that out, if you will. On the House side, the Democrats also picked up one seat. They picked up a seat up in the 10th, which is in the Whidbey Island area, where Representative Clyde Shavers helped out or defeated incumbent Greg Gilday in the 10th. So that means the tally on the House side is 58 Democrats and 40 Republicans. That's significant. Doing those numbers, it takes 10 Republican votes to carry the day and move a needle on a particular piece of legislation, which, as you can all guess, is a pretty tall order. On the flip side, that makes the Democratic caucus a little bit more, what's the word? Just a little bit more not cantankerous, but, there's a lot in there, for the Democrats to work through as well, having such a strong majority and keeping everybody within that 58 member caucus kind of happy. So with the legislative Democrats in control of both chambers, in coordination with Democratic Governor Jay Inslee, the agenda for those folks in 2023, I'm not going to get into any details, but gun violence possession, drug possession, addressing Blake, which is a priority for the FOP. Housing and homelessness. You all have probably seen in the news where the governor proposed a $4 billion affordable housing proposal using state bonds to fund a lot of it, which requires the state to go outside of its statutory debt limit, which requires legislative approval and voter approval to do that. So workforce issues, which is not something that's uncommon to our world and the law enforcement world, but workforce issues more broadly, and that includes healthcare, behavioral health, construction, DOT, law enforcement. So there's going to be a lot of time be spent on making better the workforce and incentivizing things so that folks can be brought back into the workforce. Abortion is another issue that is going to come to the fruition. And so that'll be something that comes about. And then the other big issues, as you all probably know, are budgets. And because we're in the first part of a biennium, the 2023-2025 budgets, operating, capital, and transportation will be coming forward. They do so with some increased operating budget revenue and a few uncertainties that'll kind of play out, as the session comes up. Capital gains tax has been, Supreme Court has said that it can be collected. Whether or not and how much comes in that from that revenue perspective remains to be seen. Then you also have the Department of Ecology, who's going to hold the first of 4 annual carbon auctions on the cap and trade legislation. And remember, for those of you who don't know, this is a big deal in terms of revenue. It brings in a lot of what are called Climate Commitment Act dollars that are spent largely on transportation. But if those dollars don't come in, and they're estimated to come in at just south of $500 million. And this is where polluting industries buy credits so that they can ratchet down their pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, while at the same time those credits are used on the back end after purchased to go to fund certain things on the transportation and capital side. So
Hey, Michael,
Yep.
not to interrupt you, since we're on the topic of the budget, can we approach funding for regional academies? I know you did some work on this recently, and can we just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the governor in his budget proposed some dollars for regional academies. Right now, those academies are set to be located, and I meant to look at the exact number and I didn't before this meeting. Right now, those academies are set to be located in the Tri-Cities area and then up in the Mount Vernon area, Skagit Community College. There is an effort right now by the CJTC to see if there are some dollars in this biennial budget that can get those projects started. And I'm working with the governor's office to see if that can be made so, or whether there are some ties on dollars to be used from this biennial budget versus the next biennial budget. For those of you who don't know, many of our members, including Chief Roski, participated in a press conference over this past interim with the governor and many other law enforcement agencies to get those regional academies going. And so I think, looking at Marco, that the Tri-Cities are in good stead. And then our FOP member, Jared Couch, up in the Mount Vernon area, has been instrumental in coordinating those agencies up there. Because for those of you who don't know, when you bring a regional academy outside of the CJTC, one of the things and they're on a college campus, the agencies in the area really need to have the ability to provide those TAC officers. And so there needs to be some buy-in at the local level for these regional academies. So I'll get the exact number, James. I should have that off the top of my head, but I don't. And as you all know, that's an absolute priority, regional academies for the FOP in the 2023 session. We've had lots of meetings over the committee weekends last month with chairs of appropriations committee and other folks, and this has been worked really well, and they are, I think, fully supportive of funding those sorts of things in the budget. The last thing I'll mention on that is I think there is going to be a little bit of an effort to try to get a regional academy over in the Bremerton, Kitsap area, and whether or not there's enough dough for that remains to be seen. But Senator Emily Randall over there is one who's very interested in having an academy over there. And I'm certain folks over there like Representative Tara Simmons and Representative Drew Hansen are also interested in doing that as well. So
And
I don't know if that's too much information, James, but there you are in regional academies.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to give a shout out, two of our two newest labor units are over on the peninsula, and we've been in preliminary talks with them as well as the community college over there. And so that was a great breakdown of it. I think our members over there would support having a regional academy on the peninsula. And just my conversations with Director Alexander, they've created a program to develop, hey, where's the biggest need in the state? And Skagit is right in the heart of one of the biggest needs in the state of where the officers are coming from that go to the academy now, as well as the peninsula. So to be able to address those shortfalls and the capacity issues at the academy is a really great thing. And so for our members out there on the peninsula, we're thinking about you, and we're going to get going on that as well. So.
All right. Well, as before I move into a couple other things, we had the good Mr. Symington, the good Mr. Splon, the good Mr. Banner join us as well. So I don't know if you want to give them an opportunity.
Yeah, sure. And then also in the audience is one of our lodge presidents, Chris Leba. So go ahead, Jack, introduce yourself.
There I am. Jack Symington, National Trustee, calling in from the beautiful state of Arizona where it's sunny and warm and very nice, and sucks to be you guys in the Northwest. That's all I got.
That's why we love you.
Oh, you're on mute, James. Sorry.
Mr. Spelon, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just coming from the gym. You guys got me at the end of my workout today. Bill Spawn, Eastside Vice President. And just one thing, before you move on, could you address mental illness and what they're planning on doing with that? Because this is going to affect all of our agencies. I know they attempted to put some more money into Western State Hospital earlier this year. However, what they did was they subtracted beds, both Western and Eastern State Hospital, meaning these guys are not getting their involuntary commitments, so they're missing court and they're heading back on the streets without basically any charges. And so we're sending homeless and mentally ill people back on the streets with nothing, no charges. And it's creating some real safety issues in the communities across the state.
Happy to address that, Bill. You're still on mute, James.
Mr. Banner, and then we have Mr. Leba. Go ahead.
You're on mute.
Chris, introduce yourself. Okay.
Is that
Okay.
better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go, Banner. Go ahead.
Brian Banner, the, what am I? Chairman of Trustees, I believe I am. Calling in also, I have to ditto what Jack was saying, calling in from the fairly sunny state of Arizona. Good to be here.
Chris, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. Chris Leba, President of Lodge 37, King County. Thanks for having me.
Okay, that's everybody else in the lobby. So real quick, Michael, we've talked about regional academies. Let's talk about some of the actually, let's go to pursuits because there's some stuff that happened on in the last 48 hours. Can we talk about the two bills that were filed in the last 48 hours on pursuits, both in the Senate and the House?
Yeah, so 3 bills introduced with regard to pursuits. One was pre-filed by Representative Robertson that largely took the pursuit law back to pre-1054. Senator Lovick and Senator McCune have dropped a bill that I haven't drilled down to quite yet on the details in the Senate day before yesterday. And then Representative Alicia Rule is also going to drop a pursuit bill, which may be on the intros today. If not, it'll be on Mondays. That's a little bit different, I think, as I understand it, than the Lovick-McCune bill. So for those of you who don't know, vehicular pursuits are definitely something that we're interested in, although it's, what I would call a lower tier priority for us as Blake and regional academies probably fit a little bit higher up in our priority list. But just know that pursuits are something that are definitely going to be addressed in this legislature, in my opinion. I think while there are data points that, support, both sides of the discussion on this in terms of, officer discretion and, less people getting hurt in pursuits, I think the legislature will probably, find a place in the middle where there's that balance. And we hope they do, that where's that balance between officer discretion and public safety. So we'll be talking about this probably every week as we go through these meetings in a 15-week session. But just know that vehicular pursuit bills are out there, and I expect some hearings to be had here in the next week or two.
So the only thing I have to add to that, I just want to note the two prime sponsors. One is our legislator of the year, Senator John Lovick, and the other is Representative Alicia Rule. We support, not only did we support her, we've had a great working relationship with her for years. And we're glad that they both could step up and be sponsors of these bills. So,
Yeah, I can't speak enough about both of those members who work, both really hard and really well with us. And I feel like we have really decent relationships with both, and both are really great to work with. So I look forward to, working with them as we move forward on, making vehicular pursuits a little bit better. Next bill I'll mention, and there's not a bill number yet, is law enforcement agency patterns and practices. And this was a part of this was a section in the qualified immunity bill last session, and then was kind of moved out in the current qualified immunity bill, and was kind of taken on a separate bill, if you will. So we've been working with the prime sponsor, Representative Drew Hansen, on the language in there. We actually just received a draft kind of late yesterday, and we will be working with our general counsel, Brian Moran, to work through that later today and provide Representative Hansen some suggestions that we have that hopefully will be included in a piece of legislation that's dropped earlier this week. And then we will continue to work with Representative Hansen as that pattern and practices bill moves through. Chief James and I met with Representative Hansen for a meeting yesterday. It was a really good and productive meeting. Provided him, I think, with a lot of good comments and insights into things where, like we've talked about in the past, like having agencies be accredited, and talked a little bit about, the idea of funding, particularly for smaller agencies, putting some dollars in the operating budget to encourage folks and incentivize agencies to become accredited. As we were sitting in the meeting yesterday, one of the things that struck me is that, and we know that there are some, accredited agencies out there that, may not be doing the best things, but if everybody was, accredited, it seems like the requirement for a patterns and practices bill would go away. So everybody would, be accredited and have their, their policies in place. So a patterns and practices, bill might not be necessary. So we're going to definitely continue to work on that. So, Rep. Hansen has put ourselves and representatives from the cities and WASPIC as a group to work through that legislation. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions on patterns and practices, or James or anybody else on the board has any comments.
What I would always say in regards to something like that, obviously, when it comes to a patterns of practice, intriguing concept, and it's just it's going to take some time to work through that and see what we can provide to to them, the bill sponsors, to make some tweaks and things like that to see if they'll allow that. I'm sure that based on the relationships with them, that yes, they'll be receptive to that, and I do appreciate them allowing us to be on a work group with the others to have some comments on that.
Great.
And the only thing I would add, patterns of practice kind of give you a very, very brief synopsis. It's where departments look into, or where the AG, they already have the authority now. It just, it bolsters it a little bit to be able to come in and look at how a department does things. And it really addresses the culture. And so, as Marco will tell you, or anybody on this call that's on the board, a lot of the phone calls that we field from local lodges and members, especially those that have larger labor groups in them, is that a lot of times the culture, the policy, how they do things really affects the morale and the safety of our members. So when Marco says it's intriguing, that's why it's intriguing to us. We just have to we just have to remember, and our goal is always to make sure the focus is on the agency and not the individual officer, right? We don't want anything that we get a part of to be a witch hunt toward an individual officer. So that's the only thing I would add to Marco's comments. I think it is intriguing. I appreciate the conversations that we had yesterday, and especially because they were in person more than anything, but it was a good conversation. We're part of a working group. We're providing input. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. So Michael, talk about things that are coming up this session. They talk about Blake again just for a minute, and that nothing's really dropped yet, and talk about some of the things that, as far as our priorities go, what we would like to see.
So before I do that, I'm going to get to Bill Splon's question about behavioral health, and then I'll move on into Blake. So the legislature last session appropriated a ton of dollars for behavioral health bill, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I know they poured a ton of dollars in both Western and Eastern state. I also know that the legislature also put a lot of dollars into behavioral health treatment, is going to continue to do so under 988. So let's you and I talk offline if there are any specifics that we need to chat about. But at a really high level, I think, one of the things the majority party has done a really good job of is trying to get at that behavioral health lackingness, if you will, of services that are out there, and are really trying to, bolster that up. And, in doing that, I think one of the positive things that comes out of that is that if done right, and I think, there's a pathway to having it done right. Hopefully, our members are taking less time on behavioral health type things and, moving things along. So I think there's a lot of there, but let's have a discussion offline and see if there are any specifics for you. Okay. All right. Blake decision. So on the House side, Representative Jamila Taylor has been designated as the lead on finding a fix to Blake. And on the Senate side, Senator June Robinson has been designated the lead for coming up with a Blake fix, my words, in this 2023 session. There was, a thing called a substance use, SURSAC committee, a substance use response advisory committee that met over this interim. And that was chaired by Senator Moncadingra. And they had some recommendations that have come forward that are going to be put into the, into the discussion in terms of what is best. What is the best response from a policy standpoint to Blake? What I will tell you is that the right answer is going to be somewhere between felonization, of possession, and outright legalization. So I think there's got to be, and there's should be something that comes about in the middle that, from our perspective, that has accountability, treatment, and consequences all in the same bucket, so that there's a nice balance between all of those things as we move forward in terms of drug possession policy. So I like the way this group operates in terms of policy over politics, and I'm hopeful we're going to be at the table in trying to find a fix to the Blake decision. And in a brief hallway conversation with Representative Taylor yesterday, I believe that to be the case. So we look really forward to working with her and Senator Robinson on finding an answer to the Blake decision, which again is a top priority for us.
And what I would say is I think from just a legislative standpoint, this is a priority on both sides of the aisle to make sure that there's some type of a path forward. And the turnover police has always been there to as providing our position that it's important to have that accountability piece, but also the treatment arm of that as well, because they really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And the only thing I would add to that, that this shows why the FOP is that one true voice, because we can reach out to other state lodges that have addressed this problem previously. The two that come off that we've really relied on this off season are Arizona and Rhode Island. They have some robust accountability yet treatment systems in place that the data shows seem to be working, and we would like to take a little bit from both those and bring them back here to Washington to help establish a system. So that input and being able to reach out to our brothers and sisters in other states to get that insight on how these things are working just shows how and why the FOP is that one true voice.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. So yesterday there was a hearing on Senate Bill 5120 that authorizes a behavioral health treatment model called 23-hour observation. And I have another hat as a contract lobbyist, and one of the clients of mine is Connections Health Solutions. And they are the Arizona model that James was referring to. And in their two facilities in Phoenix and Tucson, they see about 30,000 patients a year. Roughly about half of those are police, law enforcement, and first responder drop-offs. And it is truly a no wrong door treatment facility. And the law enforcement drop-off time at both of those facilities, the metric is 10 minutes to be in and out. And the metric right now runs about 6-ish minutes. So it's a really good program for law enforcement, and, you know, gets you guys and gals back on the road doing, you know, peace officer enforcement rather than, you know, trying to deal with a behavioral health situation.
Hey, so we have a question from Chris Leva, Michael. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, that bill specifically, because we have something sort of like that already in King County in a crisis solution center. Is that actually coming with funding, or is that another unfunded mandate? Because it seems like a good idea until you start talking about how much that's going to cost.
Funding comes.
Okay.
And Chris, we can have a larger discussion offline on the specific treatment model for Connections down in Arizona. It's not just a standalone 23-hour observation unit. It has some other things attached to it which make it really effective.
Yeah, just real quick. It's a drop-off, it's a drop-off facility where they don't just, it's not like an invol where they're out in one door and 2 hours later they're out the other. They get some actual treatment. They can stay up to 14 days. If I remember the presentation correctly. And then, you know, there's actually some help involved. And our goal is, one, we're not dealing with this. Our members are not dealing with this. The trained professionals that are designed to deal with this are dealing with it. And we have to get to that, go in that direction. So anyway.
And we, the FOP, signed up in favor of that legislation yesterday.
Yes, we did.
And also this is something that is that all law enforcement, at least as near as I can tell, is supportive of. WASPIC also signed up, testified in favor of the legislation, and WACOP signed up in favor as well. So it's clear that this is something that is, you know, really a positive thing for law enforcement out there. And so, yeah.
Okay. Hey,
right.
real quick, Michael, I know you, can you talk about the traffic stop bill, and then we'll wrap it up with a couple other bills that we're keeping our eye on. And then I want to wrap it up with our legislative priorities as we move forward.
So traffic stops is really better characterized as non-moving violations. And we got an early draft this interim on a proposal by the ACLU to basically decriminalize isn't the right word. It's a little early for me this morning, but to basically make it so that pulling people over for non-moving violations would be prohibited. So your tail light out, your license plate light out, things like that. basically what I would characterize as a form of a pretext stop. So there will be a piece of legislation out there to do away with non-moving violations. And I think at a really high level, that'll, it probably addresses, as I understand it from our general counsel, a lot of things that already exist in the common law, like the prohibition on pretext stops and such. So it's a bill we're going to look really closely at. One of the things when you do remove those non-moving violations from an officer's ability to stop somebody for, you really are at some level getting at public safety. If you can't pull somebody over for 2 brake lights out, I may, because of that, I may rear end somebody that I wouldn't otherwise rear end. And same thing with, headlights, taillights, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of proactive policing that goes along with non-moving violation stops. So we're not certain it's something that we're going to be able to get totally behind, but we're going to continue to work with the prime sponsors to see if we can find a place where we can, continue that public safety piece, continue that proactive policing piece, while at the same time recognizing, that on non-moving violations that, it's communities of colors and others that, to kind of take the brunt of those non-moving violations. There is a piece in there that we are extremely supportive of, and I'm going to continue to advocate that they bolster as much as is humanly possible. And that would be a fix-it ticket. And James, you can talk a little bit more specifically about that, but the idea of rather than giving somebody, whether it be a civil infraction or a minor misdemeanor for having a taillight or headlight out, is you basically give them a voucher to have it get fixed, and then once done, everything goes away. So that's something that we talked about with the ACLU several months ago. We think is something that could go a long way to helping those folks who have taillights out and headlights out. And when I was in college, I know I had them out all of the time, and not having the ability to take it to a mechanic or the wherewithal to do it myself, it's something that probably would have been greatly appreciated. So that's what I think our tact will be on that bill, James.
Yeah, just a little bit more on, what Michael's trying to get across is the purpose of this bill is to eliminate pretextual stops, to try to do everything we can to eliminate pretextual stops. Taillights out, license plate lights out are not pretextual stops, but the assertion is that they make these non-moving violations, that some law enforcement make these non-moving violations for other reasons, therefore deeming them a pretextual stop. That we all know that is not the case, right? And our stance has been, and Michael alluded to it, we've had great communication with the ACLU, who's actually the one that has brought this bill, along with the Coalition for Police Accountability. We have a tremendous relationship. We consider them viable partners in some aspects of what we do, and not, and we're always able to have really good conversations, not arguments, but good conversations where we don't agree. And this is one of those areas where we just didn't agree from day one. This was first brought to Michael and I's attention at a meeting with the ACLU, and we had a great hour-long discussion or more about this. And our take on this is this: pretextual stops, as Michael said, are illegal now. We need to create a mechanism of one, that people feel comfortable reporting those, and we're able to distinguish between good police work and people that are cutting corners and making pretextual stops. I personally believe they don't happen as often, and that this bill also has an assertion that this is a real problem. I don't believe that is the case, and I say that as a police chief, an FOP member, and 27-year law enforcement veteran. So I also understand that some communities, especially communities of color, are impacted by these low level of traffic stops. Another thing that Michael did not mention in the bill that is really a non-starter for us is that it would also prohibit arrests or traffic stops for certain warrants, like suspended and other warrants that have nothing to do with driving. It would also limit what you could talk to somebody about on a traffic stop for a moving violation. So, but the good part of this bill, and if it was a standalone all by itself, which we really wish it would be, is this grant program for agencies to receive funds so that they could develop ways for these to get fixed, solve the problem, right? Okay, hey, this week, Kennewick Police Department's gonna have people on hand from Les Schwab. You show up at the PD, they're gonna fix your taillight. They're gonna, but to provide the funding so that you could have those type of outreaches, that part of the bill is spot on and is right with the goals of community policing and serving the community, right? Which is what we signed up to do. However, the other parts of this bill, really have a lot of work. We met with one that appears to be one of the sponsors, Representative Street, the 37th. He's a brand new legislator. And Michael and I really, really appreciated him reaching out to us, cold call, so to speak. And we had a great conversation about this bill. We gave him a perspective that other law enforcement groups had not given him. And he appreciated it. But I want to be clear. This bill has a lot of work to do, and that as it stands now, it's a tough pill to swallow, and I don't see us getting behind it. So, Marco, you got any comments on this one?
Yeah, I agree, James, and when it comes to the pretext thing, we know that there's always already laws in place on pretextual stops. I do very much like that aspect of the fix it ticket. I think that is a great piece of this. And, it definitely would like to see if that would love for that to be a standalone, because we would be behind that 100%. But, it's just, we know that, the amount of work people do on traffic stops, officers, to not only inform people when things are out, because we have a lot of discretion. There's a lot of peace officers who pull people over for these low-level infractions and give warnings, and it's more of an educational piece to inform them of something that could be a danger to them, going forward. So it's definitely something that we're not quite there. And hopefully we continue to work with the bill sponsors and try to get something that might be a little bit palatable there, and work forward towards something that can benefit us.
So we're getting about that 15 minutes before the hour, and I know Michael has a time certain at the end of the hour. He's a busy man. I'm just going to start. I'm going to get mine out of the way.
Before you do that, let me run through 4 bills really quick. I'm just going to mention them so that everybody knows we're watching them, and then we'll go into priorities. 1007, which is military service credit, interruptive service credit bill from the Left 2 board that we've supported, and we're going to continue to support that. House Bill 1177, which is Attorney General request legislation with regard to creating a missing, murdered, and indigenous unit within his office that we're going to support. We think is a great idea. Just so you know, there is a bill out there to allow land use impact fees to be utilized for law enforcement facilities. And those are things that have to be contained in local governments' capital facilities plan, but we think that's a really good idea. And then there's a bill out there, 1187, that makes discussions between an employee and their union representative privileged in statute, which will also be supportive of. So I just wanted to get those out so that everybody knows that we're, tracking on some of the little things as well. And, hopefully that our support of those bills can, help them, get over the finish line. So thank you, James. And I'll go back, and if you want me to go through priorities, I'm happy to do that.
Just chime in real quick and I'll go through them. And if I miss them, anybody, Marco, Michael, I'm sure you'll help me out. So as Michael alluded to, we have our legislative priorities. Top priority for us right now is on the policy side would be the Blake fix. We discussed that today. The second top priority on the policy side or the funding side would be getting regional academies fully funded and getting them off the ground. One bill we did not talk about has not been filed yet, so we don't have a bill number, but we have had a lot of communication with the bill sponsor. Is this is going to be my term. They have a different term for it, but self-sponsoring people into the academy once we get regional academies up and going. Setting aside so many slots per academy class for someone who's not affiliated with a department to take part in the police academy. CJTC would do the background, polygraph, and psych, and the onboarding, and then agencies would be allowed to come in, interview those people, and pick them up in the academy. And then once they're picked up in the academy, the city or the agency would then be on the hook for the cost of the training and the recruiting. This is something that is done all over the country in a little bit different ways. And of course, we're putting the Washingtonian swing on it there a little bit. Our goal in our conversations, and of course the bill is not dropped yet, has been to put sideboards on it so that it doesn't come and augment for larger agencies. And that the other thing is that the agencies get a return on their investment. And for example, one of the suggestions that we had and seems to be getting considered is, hey, if someone takes part in this program and they get picked up by an agency, they have to stay with that agency for a minimum of 3 years. Another sideboard that we asked, and it seems like it's moving, is that we limit participation in this group on the agency side to populations of 70,000 or less. And what that would do is eliminate larger agencies using this to supplement their academy spaces. And so luckily for us, there's a lot of support for those sideboards. So we'll leave it there. The other priorities for that we talked about that are a little, this one's a little bit lower level, but we're is making some tweaks to the pursuit law. And we'll see where that goes with the legislature. I will point out again that two of our, favorite legislators are prime sponsors on those bills, and we thank them for taking those on. There's some other things that are going to be coming down the pipe that we want to make our priorities, and that is working with the legislature on flexible scheduling for police to get some of those people that can't really work a full or overtime and be able to fill those slots, addressing the shortages of law enforcement. The last priority, and I've probably forgotten one, but it's all right. So let me get to this one because I know it's important to a lot of longtime FOP members, and that is getting our own license plate. Right. That has been a priority since I took this job, and it continues to be a priority. It's finding the opportunity to get that bill introduced. I think things are getting there, and it is always and will continue to be a priority for your legislative team. So, Michael, with that, drop out the three that I forgot, and then we'll go on from there.
You got one. The other one I'll mention is Office of Statewide Independent Prosecution. We're continuing to work through. Representative Stonier is going to be the prime sponsor of that bill. And then the other thing I'll mention, peace officer tuition remission or reimbursement is something that we've been working with Senators Cooterer, Wilson, and Randall on, and it's something that we think is a really decent balance, or not balance, or substitution for Senator Cooterer's bill that requires some specific types of education or training prior to entering the law enforcement community. And then so those are the two that you missed. And then I know the qualified immunity bill is something that's important. We're it's one of those bills that we were supportive of last year, and given the way that it has looked this year, I'm not quite certain it's something we're going to be able to get behind. And we're looking forward to working with Representative Ty as that bill continues to move forward.
So for those that are putting the comments on Facebook, yes, we've intentionally not mentioned 1025 today. It's because we actually have a press release coming out early next week that will all be about 1025, and once that press release drops, everyone on here, we will talk about this at the next legislative meeting. We just don't want to get ahead of our own press release. But again, we've had this bill for a little bit. We've had analysis of this bill, and we have a position. We just want to be able to take care of it officially in a press release. Would you agree, Marco? Okay.
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
All right. So what I want to do now, it's getting close to time, go around the room. Any parting thoughts? Bill, you're at the top of my screen, so got any parting thoughts for us?
Negative, thanks.
Jack, how about you? Any parting thoughts?
Oh yeah, I always have something to part with. The one thing that I think we all need to continue to remember is that we do what we think is best for our membership. And just because somebody disagrees with us in a particular case, that we don't fold and go with somebody else who has some crazy ideas. We do what we do, and we're not worried about other people, what they do. We just do what we think's best. And that's why we have Michael to guide us and to give us that direction. And Shrimps are there to make sure he does his job, that he doesn't hand us up.
Thank you, Jack. And Jack is totally correct. A lot of people spend a lot of time worrying about what other people think about them. We don't. We stay focused on our members. One of the first things we always say, we're a member-driven organization, and our members are at the top of our list. We don't care what other groups do. We don't care what other people think. We're going to do us. So thank you, Jack, for those comments. Holt, you got anything for us?
Not today, thank you.
Right on. Nice to see you there from the east side of the mountain. Chris?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, so we'll close it off with Marco. Before we give it to Marco, just remember 9 o'clock every Saturday, we'll be doing these. I'll be live streaming them, and then they'll also be on our YouTube channel, FOP TV. The link will be posted once the YouTube is up. So thank you again for everybody attending. Marco, close us out, buddy.
Appreciate it, James, Michael, as always, for a very informative meeting, and everybody attending today, and those on Facebook as well. And just to add on to Jack a little bit, his comments, we are a member-driven organization. There's a reason why we have meetings on Tuesday mornings, as a large committee, that represents, peace officers from all directions of throughout the state who can give input, because it's the input from our members that help drive our decisions. And that's the beauty of what we do. And so once we get those directions, we move forward. And Michael has been a great person to guide us, and James keeping us on track. And I'm very pleased with how we've made some tremendous strides within the legislature and the partnerships that we have made on both sides of the aisle. And so we're going to continue to do that on behalf of all of you, on behalf of our members. We are that true one voice for law enforcement because of the diverse amount of diverse membership that we have from all different types of agencies. And we're going to continue to strive to do what's best for not only our members, but for law enforcement. So thanks again.
Just remember, share the link. We'll be here every Saturday, and thank you for attending.
Bye, everybody.